While babysitting my neighbor's kids, the 8-year-old asked, "Why did mommy tell daddy you're the reason they're getting divorced?" I nearly dropped the juice box I was handing to her little brother. "What do you mean, sweetie?" My voice came out higher than normal as my stomach dropped like a stone. Emma's big brown eyes stared at me with that brutal honesty only kids possess. Mommy was crying on the phone last night. She said you ruined everything and now daddy has to move out. The living room suddenly felt too small, too quiet except for the cartoon still playing on the TV. I knelt down to Emma's level, my hands trembling slightly. "Emma, sometimes adults say things when they're upset that don't make sense." But even as I said it, my mind raced through every interaction I'd had with the Morrison family. David thanking me for watching the kids, Rachel seeming distant lately, barely making eye contact during pickup, the way she'd started paying me through Venmo instead of cash, her messages cold and formal. Something was very wrong here, and I had no idea what I'd supposedly done. Emma tilted her head like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "But mommy showed daddy pictures on her phone. She said you were doing bad things." My blood turned to ice as I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers. I started scrolling through my photo gallery, my social media, anything that Rachel might have seen and misinterpreted. Then I found it buried in my Instagram from 2 weeks ago. A photo I'd posted of myself making breakfast at 7 a.m., still in my pajamas, with the caption, "Sunday morning vibes." In the background, barely visible through my kitchen window, was David's car parked in my driveway. But David hadn't been at my house that morning. I'd been alone, making pancakes for myself like I did every weekend. I stared at the photo, zooming in on the silver sedan that looked exactly like his Honda Civic. The license plate was partially obscured, but the first 3 letters were clearly visible. KJH. David's plate started with KJH. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had security cameras facing the road. Within 20 minutes, she'd sent me footage from that Sunday morning at 6:47 a.m., showing David's car pulling into my driveway while I was clearly visible through my kitchen window, alone and cooking. The footage revealed something that made my stomach lurch. David had sat in my driveway for over an hour, just watching my house while I moved around inside completely unaware. Mrs. Chen's cameras captured him taking photos through his car window, angling his phone to make it look like he was inside with me. The timestamps showed he'd been there from 6:47 to 8:23 a.m., documenting my morning routine like surveillance. I realized with growing horror that David had been creating fake evidence of an affair that didn't exist. I immediately called Rachel, my voice shaking as I tried to explain. "Rachel, I need to show you something about the photos David gave you." But she cut me off, screaming that I was a homewrecker who destroyed her family. She hung up before I could tell her about the security footage. 20 minutes later, I heard shouting from next door. Through my window, I watched David storm out with a suitcase while Rachel stood in the doorway yelling. Emma and her brother were pressed against their upstairs window, watching their world fall apart because of lies their father had created. Detective Morrison arrived that evening after Rachel filed a police report claiming David and I were having an affair. I showed her the security footage, the timeline of David's staged photographs, and my phone records proving I'd never communicated with him outside of babysitting arrangements. She studied everything carefully, then asked if I'd noticed any other strange behavior. That's when I remembered the weird comments he'd made about my schedule, how he always seemed to know when I was home alone, the way he'd linger during pickup talking about my social media posts he shouldn't have seen since we weren't connected online. The investigation revealed David's elaborate plan to frame me for an affair as a cover for his own infidelity. Police found evidence on his laptop showing he'd been meeting someone else for months at hotels during times he claimed to be at work. The staged photos of my house were part of his strategy to shift blame and make Rachel think he was the victim. His browser history showed searches for "how to prove wife's babysitter is having affair" and staging evidence of cheating for divorce court. David had been planning this deception for weeks, using me as an unwitting scapegoat for his own betrayal. Rachel called me crying 2 days later, apologizing for not listening and begging me to testify in their divorce proceedings. The security footage had proven David's deception, and Rachel's attorney needed my statement about his behavior. During the deposition, David's lawyer tried to claim the surveillance was coincidental, but the prosecutor had found 47 photos on his phone taken from my property over 6 different dates, all carefully staged to suggest intimacy that never existed. The judge awarded Rachel full custody and ordered David to pay for the therapy both kids would need after living through his psychological manipulation. 6 months later, Emma still asks me to babysit, but now she talks about how much happier her mom seems without daddy's lying games. Rachel rebuilt her life, got a promotion at work, and started dating someone who treats her with respect. David moved across town and has supervised visits twice a month, still claiming he was protecting his family. But the evidence speaks louder than his lies, and now 3 people know the truth about who really destroyed that marriage.